Hi, I'm Warwick from Harder & Steenbeck, and as you can see, slightly different intro this week, and that's because I couldn't resist sharing with you a preview of this amazing project that we're going to share with you soon. A friend of ours called Andreas wanted us to do a bunch of airbrush work on this incredible Mad Max replica Dodge Challenger that he's been building for the last couple of years. So I brought in a few friends of Harder & Steenbeck to the factory for a week to help us work on this thing. We all worked on it together. We worked with a bunch of different new parts that we're working on in our development, a lot of them from the new Infinity 2024, which is coming very, very soon. And we just had a blast working on this incredible project. Everyone from miniature painters to shoe painters to miniature portrait artists to automotive artists, and we all worked on this thing together, and it was so much fun. One of the topics that came up was all the different types of paint that we've used to achieve this. And so I thought that would be a great topic for this video. So enjoy. How do I adjust the airbrush for spraying metallic or iridescent paints to achieve the best technique, the best finish without clogging? Now, contrary to popular belief, the size of the chips in brush paints or airbrush paints are actually very small. And they move through the airbrush really without too much bother at all. When we start talking about crazy things like metal flake, for example, that you might find in a California custom auto shop, then that's obviously a different ballgame. But when we're talking about iridescents, metallics, pearlized paints, honestly, they run through the airbrush pretty well. What you've got to be a little bit careful of if you want to have a nice, consistent movement of the paint is you don't want to let the base be too thick, because that's when the particles can kind of tend to stay together and not separate in order to flow well through the airbrush. So generally speaking, what I'd say is this. If you're trying to put down a bronze or a silver or whatever it might be, thin it a little bit more than you'd thin a normal paint. So make it really quite liquid, and then just understand that you're going to want to build that up in several layers. The general rule of thumb when you're building up paint is when you're putting it down, you don't want to see it coming up to a gloss. You want to let it come up to a satin, and that's about as wet as you want to let it get on the surface that you're painting. And that way it's going to be safe. It's not going to go mobile and start moving around on the piece, as long as you only go up to a satin rather than going all the way up to a full gloss. The only exception to that is when you are trying to make a gloss clear. Then of course you do go up to a gloss, but you've got to do that really carefully so that you don't get any runs or mobility in the paint. So yeah, I'd say just over thin them a little bit more, just a touch more, just so that you're sure that you're not getting any interlocking of those metallic or pearlized particles. And then you'll be surprised at what you can run them through. I mean, in our context, for example, at the 0.28 on the Evolution, you can run metallics, iridescents, pearlescents through that, absolutely no problem at all. In the example of Vallejo paint, which many of you are familiar with, I would say that when you thin those down 1-to-1, the air paints 1-to-1 with the thinner, they work great through the 0.28. You're never going to expect to be able to paint extreme detail with a metallic paint just because of the fact that there are bigger particles in it. So you're not going to be expecting to lay down lines with it, but this is generally not what you tend to use those paints for anyway. So hopefully that helps. Thin it a touch more just to make sure that the paint moves really well through the airbrush. The particles themselves are not a problem. They're never going to cause any damage to your airbrush. There's nothing to worry about in regards to that. They absolutely will not cause any damage to anything in any airbrush, any brand. I can promise you that. You're not going to damage anything in them with what those particles are made out of. So use them with impunity, but just thin them a little bit more than you might normally do and build them up in maybe 2 or 3 more layers than you might normally do with a regular base color, and you'll be absolutely fine. How can I achieve a smooth gradient effect with my airbrush without getting harsh lines or spots? Okay, this one I am going to do a demo of at some point in the very near future, but for now just a short explanation so that it's caught up among as many videos as possible. The key to it is 2 things, very simple. Number 1, put your first side-to-side pass down. Okay, so there you go. Now what you're going to see there is a band of color. Your next one, aim the center of your spray pattern, the center of your airbrush. Aim it at the edge of the first one. Don't aim it into space so that they join. okay? Because that middle part, it won't be, there'll be an inconsistency there. You aim the center of your next pass at the edge of the previous one. So it's got a good 50% overlap, and you hit that down. And the next one, you aim the center of the airbrush at the edge of the previous pass. This will build up an absolutely perfectly flat, perfect distribution of color. If you're trying to do a color fade, the easiest way to start doing this, if you want to do it really systematically so that you can understand how it works, first few that you do, I'd recommend you do them like this. First pass down, second pass, aiming the center at the edge of the next, again up, same thing. Do maybe 5 of those. So you've got 5 passes there. Then go in again, do the same thing over the first 4. Then do the same thing over the first 3, over the first 2, and then hit that last one again. And you'll have a very nice grading of color there. That's the basis of all of the techniques of making a fade. It's basically just that. So there's other ways you can start to expand on it, like flicks, when you're trying to do a fade over a very narrow area. All of that stuff will come naturally to you once you understand that fundamental of how to correctly overlap. That's point 1. Point 2 is never change direction on the surface that you're painting without shutting and opening the trigger. So let me expand. If you get your airbrush on a piece of paper, pull the trigger back, and you paint left to right, and you don't close the trigger as you change direction. What you'll see is the ends will start to get much darker. And that's basically because you're slowing the airbrush down, you're stopping, changing direction, and starting again. So you get more paint build over there. So what you need to learn to do is start moving before, so get your air on, start to move, and once you're moving, then you introduce the paint. That will give you a feathered edge to the start. Go along your pass, close the trigger off while you're still moving. That'll feather that edge off. Then you come up on the next pass, center of the airbrush aimed at the edge of the previous color band. Again, start moving, pull the trigger back, push the trigger forward, stop moving. And then you'll have this beautiful feathering in this way and on the edges. Those 2 things, if you obey those 2 rules, you'll have all of the basics to starting to get perfect color fades and gradients, and everything else builds up very easily from there. What are the differences between water-based and solvent-based airbrush paints, and how does each affect the performance of the airbrush? Okay, so don't get caught up in all this, okay? They're paints, and they don't affect the performance of the airbrush in any way at all. They're just paints. Make sure that you always use the right thinner and cleaner for that paint, so ideally from the same brand, so that you're not mixing and matching thinners and cleaners. That can get you into trouble. Almost all airbrushes nowadays, I think, are pretty good with solvent paints, at least on the paint bearing parts. I can't speak for everybody, but certainly here at Automotive and Steenbeck, all of our white O-rings are completely solvent resistant, and all of our black O-rings are a very, very high grade of Viton that is perfectly happy with, with most grades of solvent that you can throw at them. However, having said that, don't soak things in solvent when you're cleaning. Soaking really doesn't do anything. If you stick to our normal published methods of cleaning, it's super easy, super quick, and actually much more effective than this idea of soaking things. But I think the main takeaway from this really is if you are using water-based and solvent-based on the same project, protect yourself in the appropriate way, your breathing, and secondly, don't let them get anywhere near each other on your piece if they're not fully cured. That is really a recipe for a bit of a drama, so best avoided. Can I use automotive paints in my airbrush, and what modifications or precautions should I take? Yes, no modifications, no precautions. Go ahead and have a laugh. No problem at all. They're just solvent paints. There's really no problem at all with putting automotive stuff through there. Right up to if you want to put 2-part clear coats through the airbrush, that's no problem either. But of course, with those types of paints, please do be very cautious with how you're protecting your lungs and your breathing and so on, because those paints can be a bit nasty if you ingest them. So not recommended. But as far as the airbrush goes, not a problem at all. Can I mix different brands or types of airbrush paint, and if so, what considerations should I keep in mind? I don't think that the upside of doing this is worth the risk. Okay, so let me give you an example. certain water-based paints, when mixed with certain solvent-based paints, will turn into this awful rubbery ball of nonsense that is so difficult to get out of your airbrush. Just not a risk worth taking. My advice is if you're using paint brand X, use the thinner from paint brand X. Use the cleaner from paint brand X. If you're using paint brand Y, use the thinner and the cleaner from paint brand Y. There's a couple of notable exceptions to this. For example, Citadel brush paints tend to work really well when you thin them with Tamiya X20A airbrush thinner. It's just a really nice recipe that works really, really good. But by and large, I would say try to stick to the paint brands. Why you would need to mix one color from one brand with another color from another brand in the airbrush, I'm not quite sure. If you want to layer them and achieve a blend between them, then do it by laying the lighter of the two colors down first, and then transparently work in the darker of the two colors over later, so that you're not mixing them in the airbrush, you're mixing them on the part that you're painting. And the other big advantage that has, of course, is that when you're working transparently and building up layers and controlling your color that way, you've got profound control over how you create that mix, and you'll have a much more precise color represented at the end of it. That's exactly what you want. So I'd encourage you to do it on the piece, not in the airbrush, if you're wanting to mix paint brands. As ever, thank you so much for being with us on the channel. If you've got any questions about the topics raised in the video, please leave them in the comments. We will respond to every question that you give us. Other than that, if you've got some knowledge about airbrush painting that somebody else could benefit from, please be the person who gives it to them, because the rewards will be all yours when you see them enjoying their creativity more as a result of your generosity and help. Thanks everybody, take it easy, and see you next time.